Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach, always available too at carolthecoach.com.
Now I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
And welcome to Sex Help with Carol the Coach. Hi, I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, and I am here with you tonight to talk about a treatment center that is halfway across the world. The Cabin, which is actually in northern Thailand, it's called the Cabin Chiang. I'm going to be talking with two staff members there that talk and help people with their addictions. You know, they are amazing guys. This is Asia's most respected drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. They offer affordable, high-quality addiction treatment in an environment designed for healing and growing. David McGuire and Alastair Mordley are available to talk with you tonight, as well as to teach us a little bit about what is the difference between a process addiction and a substance addiction, and how do they break through the denial. Now, you all know, if you've been listening to the show, that denial is that first stage that you go into when you recognize you have a problem, but like a mouse on the screen, you go back and forth from saying, I've got this problem, I need to change, I need to make my life better, and then you flip over to the other side and you say, I'll do it tomorrow, it's really not that bad, I'm not hurting anybody, this is my own secret, you know, and you go back and forth until either A, a crisis occurs, and you go, my goodness, you know, I just can't take it any longer. I've got to straighten out my life. Or you have some sort of religious conversion, life-death experience, something that says there is more to life than this dual relationship you have, and it's time to get centered and focused and to be congruent, authentic, and transparent with your life. So we're going to be talking to these guys about why someone would go to the Cabin. It is an amazing treatment facility. It's located in a very charming city, Chiang Mai, and it's in the rolling mountains of northern Thailand. Now, I know when I say Thailand, what do you think? You probably think things like sex change operations, prostitution, younger women. So we're going to be talking about those cultural issues too, and as well as, obviously, the ABCs to how to get healthy, how does this treatment center use cognitive behavioral therapy? I teach that. And so I really am a believer. It is the number one type of therapy that is most helpful across the board. So I want to hear how these guys use this in sex addiction as well as other substance addictions. And then they're going to be talking about their idea of what is the 3 circles. You've heard me talk about that. And, it's interesting because there are so many definitions of the 3 circles. The one that I wrote about in group work for sexual recovery is a little bit different than the SAA book. And so it'll be interesting to see if David and Alastair, if they also have the same 3 circles or if they've tweaked it a little bit. One of the things that I know to be true is the 3 circles is one of the most helpful tools in being able to picture your entire life and decide what do you need to focus on, what are you doing already, what are you focused on already that is changing your life, and how can you tweak that, make that healthier so that you don't slip or relapse. And last week, we talked about relapse autopsy with Tim Stein, and he talked about what do you do to prevent a relapse. And we learned the difference between slips and relapses. And so this is really going to offer you an opportunity to know more about the addiction and why we consider it a disease, what is denial, and again, the differences between process addictions and substance abuse. Now, this inpatient addiction treatment center, the Cabin, in northern Thailand, is comprised of a modern, intelligent, physical, and holistic program that has come highly recommended amongst the medical community globally. So if you need to get away, if you live in the States, if you live in England, if you live in Europe, and you want to get away and really focus on your addiction, this might be the place that you want to pursue. And they're going to be talking about their website. They're going to be talking about what is differing about their treatment center versus other treatment centers. And again, they're going to be talking about what they use. The principal treatment is 3 circles, and it combines cognitive behavioral therapy, a highly personalized approach tailored to the individual's specific addiction treatment needs. The 12-step program, you've heard me talk about that. They say it's been secularized and rationalized by our clinical team to better suit modern addiction terminology and treatment. And then they're going to be talking about exercise therapy, meditation techniques, mindfulness. They aim to create a sound mind and body, and that really is the key to getting healthy. It's not just the recovery tools you need for addiction. It is that plus all the things that will make you feel healthy and whole, keep you centered, and get you to feeling the feelings and create the kinds of thoughts that will better yourself. So David and Alastair, welcome to the show. I'm so pleased to be talking to you all the way over there in northern Thailand. How are you doing tonight?
Thanks, Carol. It's great to be here. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to get the word out amongst your listeners about our treatment options.
Yeah, so tell me, how long has the Cabin been in existence, and what makes you different from other forms of treatment?
Hi, Carol. Yeah, it's been 5 years now, and I'd say there's several sides to the program that make us unique. We utilize several tools, which we can probably talk about in more detail, as well as what you mentioned, a slightly different take on the 3 circles, which hopefully will be interesting for your listeners. But we use a tool called mind mapping, which a lot of people will know, which is an educational tool to help our clients talk about things and write things more easily. So mind mapping is basically like a picture. And our clients bring that as a sketch into the group, so that's quite a unique thing. And then the way that we use CBT is tailored for addiction rather than anxiety and depression. So I'd say really the way that we've taken existing tools and really honed them for an addiction client, and what's more, lots of different cultures, addiction clients that are coming from a lot of different countries, because we've had to find a way of building a multicultural model, which would probably be quite interesting to your listeners as well. And then, of course, the Vipassana meditation, which is native to Southeast Asia, which we use here, known as mindfulness in the West.
Okay, and I'm going to reference you as Allie because you are the program director there, and obviously you really spend a lot of time creating clinical programs that you know will help. So let's just talk about mind mapping for 1 second, because that's an interesting concept. I know that I do personal life coaching as well as therapy, and when you want to take somebody to that next level and have them see their life differently, mind mapping can be crucially helpful in changing how you view the world and how you see yourself in the world. So how would somebody with an addiction use mind mapping?
That's right, Carol. It's not being used a lot in addiction work, but it's an extremely good tool, as you probably know, and many of the listeners will know. When we go to treatment, oftentimes the treatment centre will have us obviously write some of our life story as a step one, in order to set the scene and to be able to self-diagnose the illness, as it were. The problem I find with that in treatment centres I've worked in, growing up as an addiction counsellor, is that asking a client to write a long narrative, particularly a difficult narrative to write, the stuff which is very shaming for them, etc., is difficult because most people aren't writers. They can't sit down and write that well necessarily. In fact, a lot of my clients that I work with in the UK couldn't write. They were illiterate, which is exactly why mind mapping was developed. So mind mapping, as you know, is a picture that looks a little bit like our brain. So the central subject will go in the middle of the piece of paper, and then the thoughts will radiate outwards, which is exactly how our brain works. So we draw branches off the central node for all the different parts of that subject that we want to talk about. So it's a way of building a sketch of your using history or your acting out history using key words. So we don't intellectualize and go into a long-winded explanation of our acting out history. We can use keywords and key pointers. And then taking that map into group, because as we know, group is where the dynamic is in addiction treatment, perhaps as distinct to other conditions like marital problems or anxiety or depression, where we can probably do one-on-one therapy and make good ground. But with addiction, as everybody knows, you require your peers. So when we take that map into a group session, all we have is the basic facts, and that then allows the counsellors and the peer group to assist, challenge, and pursue the client further. So, if you like, it rids us of the romanticising or the war stories or the long narratives that we might write when we're early on in treatment, and just gives our peers a good snapshot of what's happening so they can ask more questions.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying, if I may be so bold, is that it gets past some of the BS that maybe we use to fool ourselves, as well as it utilizes those primary brain functions, probably in the right hemisphere, that takes you right to the things that intuitively and unconsciously you know about yourself, but maybe don't correlate or put together because you're just coming off the addiction.
Well, quite right, Carol. Yeah, as we know, what the neuroscience is telling us now is that what we're dealing with is essentially a memory disease. And what's more, as a lot of listeners will have heard, we're getting pretty close, even though it's not a single gene disorder. Addiction's a difficult illness to understand, but we're making a lot of headway now. And we know that the primary cause of addiction, if you like, is neurotransmitter dysregulation, and we know that dopamine is heavily implicated in that. So when you're mind mapping, you're stimulating a lot of dopamine activity in a nice, slow-release, long-acting manner. And if you like, the power of mind maps, as Tony Bazan, who was the educationalist who developed it, the power of mind maps is that it frees up your memories, if you like, and the associations using pictorial form instead of written form basically frees up your associating ability. So you can not only draw memories out that are perhaps a bit stuck in there, but you can also start to link the thought processes much better. And then later on in treatment, we use mind mapping to develop vision and then build positive affirmations, and using, positive psychology and cognitive psychology to effectively build new memories, because we've actually done the things we will affirm our goals and our visions, which again is stimulating memory and learning centers. So my take on it is that we have to build counseling models around the neuroscience. And we all know that the 12 steps have, probably the largest efficacy in treating the illness. So it's incumbent on us as professionals to learn how to wield that in the most useful way, given what we now know about the disease of addiction in terms of the neuroscience.
Well, and David, I'm gonna throw the conversation to you for a second. Doesn't mind mapping sound a lot like the trauma egg, and how the trauma egg is used with symbols as opposed to one word?
Yeah, absolutely, Carol. And actually, thanks for going there, because, my history and training, as you know, I'm a certified sex addiction therapist. I got my certification through ICAP, which means that, I was trained in all Carnes' models, the Carnes' model of the tasks and performables. I've been practicing with that in private practice in Beverly Hills, and having great success with that, and also doing some contracting with the rehabs in the Los Angeles area as well. When I came out here, it was really an inspiration to bring my training and my skills to a part of the world, like, as you mentioned in the intro, Southeast Asia, heavy with sex addiction, right? And I thought this was a great opportunity to bring those skills and that training to this area of the world to help more people, to help a greater population where, I went into the jungle, And when I showed up here and started to digest the current treatment model here, which included mind mapping, I was really inspired, because essentially what we're doing is the same tasks and performables, except it's being done rather than list work and item numbering and storytelling. We're putting it up on the board in a picture. And it's kind of hard because we're on a radio show. I can't really actually show you what a mind map would actually look like. But if your viewers could, if your listeners could imagine the image of a brain cell, right? A neuron in the brain cell, and how the neuron has a nucleus with branches coming off of it and dendrites hooking up to other neurons, right? And so we actually put a picture up on the board where in the center it could be the powerlessness over the disease, right? And my sex addiction clients, when they're doing that, they're starting to map out how they really lost the choice over their addictive sexual behaviors, right? So a branch off of that might include their entire denial system, right? And pictorially, visually, they're seeing how they've minimized their behavior, right? How they've legitimized their behavior. One form of legitimization is, well, I'm not getting along with my wife, so I have a right to go out and find sex elsewhere, right? How they've rationalized their behavior. Well, I'm not hurting anybody, right? and how they've really like reinforced a lot of these tools, how they've hidden, how they've lied around it, and put it up there. I mean, these guys actually, they get a chance to go through each one of these mind maps 3 times, right? They're drawing a picture for themselves on a piece of paper. We encourage them to use different colors for each of the branches so that the brain is stimulated, the right hemisphere is stimulated in that way. They do it on their own. They come in and they sit with me in a one-on-one individual session, and we go through it again. And hopefully, if I'm doing my job well, they're opening up to more information about their addiction, about their powerlessness or their unmanageability. And then they go into group in front of their peers who understand their addiction, and they put it up on the board and they get challenged by group members as well. So that they're really going through this process 3 times, and it's not just list work, left hemisphere brain, kind of out of touch with the emotion that's attached to it. There's something about putting that image up on the board that really helps open up the emotion, much like the trauma egg, like you mentioned. When we did the trauma egg in the trainings, right, it was all about images of the past traumatic events and how they've all piled up on each other to fill the egg. And I think the person who practices this, our clients, and I've done my work myself around this, there's an experience that's much different than writing out paragraph after paragraph or list after list. It hits a different part of the soul. And there's an experience of the unmanageability or the powerlessness that really gets through and taps in kind of memory blocks that they might be suffering from.
Well, and it sounds like part of your choice to use the ABCs of treatment is to find things that are the most effective with clients. I mean, why do you believe people would come from all over the world to the cabin in Chiang, which is, of course, in northern Thailand?
Well, Carol, I think the answer to that is, down here in Southeast Asia, we do get quite a lot of Americans and people from the UK. We also get a lot of Australians, and the Australian example would be an interesting one. In Australia, they have a big harm min movement, which is great for providing safety for injecting drug users and so on, but as I'm sure a lot of your listeners would agree, not so good if it starts to impact on 12-step rehabs and funding for things like that. So we get a lot of Australian clients who are intelligent consumers, and they understand that these hospital wings and glorified psych wards that are currently offering what's essentially just a detox, and certainly not very much in the way of treatment for sex addiction, they're starting to realize that they have to go elsewhere for their treatment. So we get a lot of escapees from the super clinical system in Australia, if you like. They want to get back to basics, but then on top of that, obviously, we're a fairly pioneering centre. So they get the good old-fashioned inpatient treatment model, because as intelligent consumers, they understand that their addiction is so chronic that they need intensive treatment. And their psychologists or GPs who might be the gatekeepers for their treatment there in Australia have failed them in the sense of not understanding the disease, that sometimes when the disease is so progressed, you need intensive treatment. So we get a lot of people from countries that haven't quite got their model right. Then, of course, we get the nationalities that are local, which, as Dave already explained, is hugely interesting work. So, we may well get expatriate guys who are having trouble with alcohol and sex in Singapore, Hong Kong, Bangkok, and also, their wives and partners, and sometimes sex workers as well. And then, on the other hand, we'll get UK and American people that are going to treatment and have decided that they might have had treatment once in the bigger centres in the UK and America. And they like the idea of Vipassana meditation. They like the slightly secular take that we've got on the 12 steps, because we essentially put the steps into the circles. So we do it slightly differently to other 12-step centres who would use longhand steps, as it were, and start to work people through steps. And my thing with that is that I prefer to use 3 circles in this day and age when we have somewhat limitations on the length of stay. So back in the UK, we used to be able to get funding for people for 3 months of treatment, was standard. 3 months or 6 months, which, as we all know, in terms of neuroadaptation or brain plasticity, is probably what's required to bed down serious changes. We don't get that now with insurance, etc. We get a month to 3 months. So it's incumbent on us to find goals that we can achieve within 1 month. So for me, then you're looking at 3 circles for the reasons that you mentioned in your introduction. You have got your bottom line, your abstinence plan, if you like, what constitutes abstinence for you, your relapse prevention plan effectively in the middle circle, and your life goals that are recovery orientated in your outer circle. We call them zones here because we have to put them into squares. And when you're doing written work, I find it easier to do them in a square space than a circular space. So we call them zones, which again sort of leads us to the idea that certainly when you get into the outer circle, it's more of a zone. You have your first order and second order changes, as Carnes taught us. So they're seeing the model is pioneering and works for them. But through the way we're working the 3 circles makes the terminology more secular. It lends itself more to CBT, perhaps, than traditional STEP terminology does. With countries like Scandinavian countries and Australia, you've got to realise we've got a lot of atheists there, so they need to be catered for as well, almost as though they were another religious group. So we need to cater for multiple nationalities and cultures who aren't all Christian. We've got Christians, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, Confucianists, Taoists in treatment every day of the year. So we need a model that's secular whilst still being spiritual. So that is the 3 circles for me, and we utilise it with substance addictions as well. So if we've pioneered the 3 circles in any way, I would say it would be in using it also with substance addictions, because what we're understanding again about addiction as an illness is it's a primary illness that has various manifestations. So why don't we treat the whole illness? So into the inner zone or the active zone, inner circle, will go a variety of dopamine reinforcing behaviours that have become destructive, what we call addictions. So that could be heroin addiction, or it could be sex addiction.
Now, you believe that addiction is a disease? Because I know there's some speculation in different treatment centers all over the world. Do you believe that addiction is a disease?
Carol, it is a disease, and there isn't any real serious debate anymore in my view. If we look at ASAM or NIDA or any of the medical bodies that are collating the research, we know it's a primary illness, which means it's only got one cause. We know what that cause is. It's neurotransmitter dysregulation. Of course, the neurochemistry is quite complex, but if we want to paint a picture for our clients, we can explain to them that very largely it's a genetically inherited condition. So NIDA are telling us 40 to 60% of us will inherit this illness genetically. We will be somewhere between somewhat and very reward deficient. So a lot of us will be ill before we see a drink or have sex for the first time. We will already be ill with a primary illness, which is raging away in our brain and causing very, very particular symptoms. So the symptoms, for me, the most obvious ones would be horrendous boredom, the like of which ordinary people don't experience, and a lack of meaning and purpose, what ASAM would describe as the spiritual symptoms of addiction, which I would call the higher emotional symptoms of addiction. And, of course, there are biological symptoms and psychological symptoms like impaired reasoning. So this is a very real illness. It's not an easy illness to understand because the brain is a brain disease and the brain is a hard organ. And what's more, it's not a single gene disorder. So it takes time to understand this illness, but it's very unlikely that the neuroscientists are significantly wrong. They're pretty much on the right track now, and we know it's a disease.
Okay, so that's what I thought too, and certainly there are people that still wonder about sexual addiction. They say, okay, I can believe that drug and alcohol abuse is an addiction, and an addiction is a disease. But sex addiction, come on, that's just people having bad behavior. So I want to ask you, do you believe that sexual addiction is a disease?
Hey, Carol, it's Dave. I'll speak to that question. You know,
okay.
I really do actually. I do understand that position. I think, you know, most of the time that stance is taken by loved ones of the sex addict who have been hurt terribly and understandably by the transgressions, infidelities, and health risks that they've been exposed to because of the sex addict's behaviors. And it seems as if to them that to call it an addiction is really just letting them off the hook, right? But through my training at ITAP and the real neuroscience that's gone on around sex addiction, not only behaviorally does it clearly match the addiction process of a substance dependent, but also neurologically, what we're seeing is that the same reward areas of the brain, and I won't get too much into the science for you, your listeners probably aren't too interested in the actual areas of the brain, but it's hitting the same reward centers as drug and alcohol addiction. It's a part of the brain that has the power to overcome the rational reasoning part of the brain, and it drives the behavior in a very illogical way. So family, friends, loved ones, partners of the sex addict look at the addict and they say, how can he or she be doing this behavior that's so illogical, right? And when they're looking that way, actually they're using the wrong part of their brain to understand it. The addiction does not exist in the logical, rational part of the brain. The addiction exists in the limbic system, which controls the survival aspects. And what's happening to a sex addict, and you know, we could get more into the underlying psychological issues, but when a sex addict is triggered or is craving or is in the, to use an SAA term, is in the bubble, right? That rational, logical part of the brain is actually diminished. It's being overridden by the limbic system. And it's not a cognitive thought, but the drive is as if I don't do this behavior, I'm at risk for dying. That's how strong that drive is. And because it can be neurologically tracked, it's actually a disease. And as Ali said, this disease was probably existing way before the addictive behaviors came in. These behaviors are simply triggered by the chemical imbalance in the brain that gives an addict the drive for reward in a way that a non-addict doesn't have. You know, and so it's understandable, the argument against it. And you know what? Maybe there are some people out there who are really just behaving badly and saying, oh, I'm a sex addict as an excuse to get out from under the radar. But the fact of the matter is, when we get the sex addicts in here and they're willing to admit, and actually, just so that you know, we do use a very expensive assessment tool around our addicts before admission. They're required to do Carnes' online SDI that is extremely thorough and breaks the addict out into the different subcategories of the sex addiction. It's gone through very diligently, and really, I mean, it's actually one of the first tools to break through any kind of denial that might still exist around the addiction. So
well, absolutely. So let me see, Dave. Are you saying that when a client is considering coming to the cabin in northern Thailand, you said northeastern Thailand, right?
Yes.
So when they are considering coming, one of the assessment tools you use is the SDI.
That's correct, Carol.
And so tell our listeners a little bit about the SDI, because you and I know what that is because it was developed by Dr. Patrick Carnes and his fellows. But explain what the sexual dependency inventory is all about.
Well, sure. Thanks very much for that opportunity. I mean, it's a very thorough assessment tool that Carnes has developed over, I'm not sure how many, probably about 10 years, right, Carol?
Yeah, I think it's almost 15 now.
The way that it's developed technologically is that I can administer this tool from halfway across the world without a problem because it's Internet-based and it's secure and it's completely anonymous. What would happen is if a client were interested and curious about their sex addiction, they'd simply contact us over at the cabin. I'd create a login identity for them that's completely anonymous. They could log in on a website and go through I think it's in excess of 135 questions. It's extremely thorough. There are sub-indices to actually try to root out any kind of dishonesty, much like the old psychological assessment tools, the MMPI. They've been interwoven in there to try to make sure that we're getting clean and honest answers. And when they take this assessment, I print it out on my end because I'm just logging into the same website through my therapist ID. And I can go through it and give them a full assessment about what they're looking at in terms of their addictive behaviors.
Well, and the wonderful thing, as David indicated earlier, is not only does it tell you to what degree you have sexual addiction, but it breaks it down into subcategories. So it may tell you, listeners, that you are prone to fantasy sex or seductive sex or exhibitionism or voyeurism, and it breaks it down into all those subcategories. And although we treat all people with sexual addiction with some of the exact same tools, we also know that these categories need to be looked at and dealt with a little bit differently. So I just think that's phenomenal. I don't know of other treatment centers that are using that as a screening tool. And the beautiful thing about an SDI is that are you giving them then the workbook that describes their sexual addiction as well as has them work on certain categories, whether they decide to come to the cabin or not?
Yeah, that can certainly be provided, assuming that they do. The way that we're set up here at the cabin is that we have 3 phases of treatment, right? Mm-hmm. Phase 1 is really about focused on breaking through the denial and really understanding the addiction. And I'd just like to take a moment to speak to the seductive role sex addict, because I think that there's a lot of people out there who suffer from this type of addiction, from the seductive role sex addiction and the fantasy sex addiction, that aren't actually having physical sex with anybody. And it can be minimized and rationalized incredibly, but yet they're still suffering from the same negative consequences as an addict who's spending tons of money seeing prostitutes. This addiction really robs us of our happiness. And a seductive role sex addict may actually never even come in physical contact with another human being, but yet their lives are overcome and destroyed by this constant need to seduce and be wanted by another human being. And so that is one of the categories that the FBI does root out. And actually, we just had somebody come through here recently who was suffering from this type of a sex addiction. And when he came in, he said, I don't know that it's really an addiction. I've never actually had sex with anybody other than my wife. And when we started going through the behaviors, he sure wasn't being faithful.
Well, yes, and, although I absolutely agree with you, there's also seduction whereby the actual act of seducing and pursuing is the addiction. And once that person has gotten with the other person, they realize that's not what they want, and they're off to the next seduction. So obviously, we say sexual addiction is an intimacy disorder, and this is just another type of sexual addiction that keeps you from really developing true intimacy, both with the person that you're pursuing, because once you get him or her, you don't want that. You want the next best thing. and 2, because it affects your relationship that you may have with a partner. And that is always so tough. Now, let me ask you, does the cabin provide any family, marital, partner treatment?
Yeah, actually, Carol, I just facilitated one over the last 2 days. We follow the same standard of care as any other sex addiction treatment in the States or abroad. There is a phase of the treatment for the sex addict that will usually come in phase 3 of their treatment year, where the wife will come on site with her therapist as well. We go through a formal disclosure process where all the behaviors are disclosed in a formal and very organized setting. And then as standard care states also is that the wife then has already prepared and states her non-negotiable and emotional boundaries it could be the wife or the husband or whoever the other significant other is. States their formalized boundaries. And then we also take time to help to create some vision for the future, to begin the process of what it's going to be like to try to reintegrate a healthy intimacy in the relationship now having gone through this. So that is absolutely a part of the treatment plan. I think it's essential for anybody who's in a relationship and suffering from sexual addiction. Now, if I do have a sex addict who doesn't have a primary relationship where there's been unfaithfulness and transgressions and betrayal, the family is involved also. We have a standard family feedback form that's sent out to the family members. They give their input about how the addiction has affected them as well as the effects that they see on the addict. And our clients are given that feedback and given the opportunity to process it in group as well as use that information to build their mind maps even more thoroughly.
Got it. Yeah, your program sounds so comprehensive. Would you give our listeners the website for the cabin and a way to contact you to find out more information about the programming?
Yeah, Carol, it's www.thecabinchiangmai.com. So the cabin followed by the city, Chiang Mai, so that's spelled C-H-I-A-N-G, Chiang, and Mai is M-A-I. So thecabinchiangmai.com. On the website, obviously, the client can look through our program. There's quite a lot of educational information on our website. We do a lot of blogging. We do have a lot of e-books. There's a lot of resources for parents and partners and addicts themselves. And unusually, for a rehab website, quite a detailed breakdown of our program and the technology that we're using in counselling. So it's a more detailed explanation of what actually happens in group and one-to-one therapy than you would ordinarily see on a rehab's website. So that the potential clients can get all the information they need there and contact us anytime. And we, like a lot of treatment centres, will endeavour to get clients in very quickly, if at all possible. So I hope we've been of help today, Carol.
Oh, absolutely. And I so appreciate the information that you're disseminating to our listeners. I mean, I think it's fascinating that this is a multicultural program and people would come to the cabin. Now, do you believe that there is something that the cabin does that stands out in a different way, comparatively speaking, to other treatment centers in the country?
Yeah, absolutely. And the place, it's all interlinked, you see, but the place that I would start with in explaining that would be mindfulness meditation. It's native to Thailand, Laos, and Burma, but it's extremely well known now in the West. Here we call it Vipassana. In the West, it's known as mindfulness, and as you know, on a lot of national health services and in a lot of psychology practices all over the Western world, mindfulness is used to combat anxiety and depression, etc. Well, here we have mindfulness coaches who are Westerners who will train addiction clients, no matter what addiction, in what we might call urge surfing, and sort of quite well-known Western techniques developed by people like Marlon. But then as you enter into phase 2, it becomes much more Thai. So we have monks who come on site and train traditional Thai Vipassana meditation, which is different to ordinary meditation, or the meditation we used to know about in the 60s, 70s, 80s, which was really Mahayana-style meditation, Indian, Japanese, Chinese styles of meditation, where you concentrate on an object. But the point of mindfulness Vipassana is that you don't do that. You simply allow thoughts and feelings to wash over you and develop a sort of stoicism or an ability to simply allow the cravings, let's say, the cravings and urges to come and go. And so we've got the real source here. We're right at the root of it here. So we have intelligent, young, liberal and open-minded monks from the local temples who enjoy to come and do walking and sitting meditation. So again, unlike other forms of meditation, Vipassana, particularly Thai-style Vipassana, teach walking meditation, which is really, really good for addicts, particularly young addicts, who might find it difficult to sit down for a whole hour cross-legged meditating. So we do rounds where we sit and then walk, sit and then walk. So we've got the traditional, authentic root source of mindfulness meditation that we are right in the middle of. Now that then leads into CBT, because as a lot of people know, mindfulness has got a lot of similarities with cognitive behavioral therapy. Mm-hmm. So again, we then use the mindfulness practice to build an awareness of self-talk. So when people are practicing mindfulness meditation, they'll become very aware of their negative addict self-talk that's going around in their head. And that's why we need to use the ABC tool of CBT, which teaches us A, what's activating it, B, what's our belief about it, and C, what are the consequences in terms of toxic feelings and slippery behaviors. Which then leads into the 3 circles, of course. Because what is an ABC other than a middle circle? So our ABCs that we've done in CBT, which are addiction-specific, then wind up in our middle circle, which is our relapse prevention plan. All the activators that we specifically as addicts experience, all of the belief systems that are our addict belief systems, and all of the consequences, which is slippery behaviors and toxic feelings like shame and rage and so on. So the 3 fit very, very nicely together. And I think we're unique in doing it that way, but certainly very difficult for a Western treatment centre to have the depth of the meditation training that we have here.
If I could
Absolutely.
just briefly add in terms of...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Carol. Yeah, I just wanted to add on, just in terms of the mindfulness practice, I mean, maybe your listeners already know, but mindfulness meditation actually helps to heal the brain. Right? There's been a lot of research, clinical research recently around that, and what they're finding is that the trauma treatment methods, EMDR, somatic experiencing and such, really do hit the limbic system and help heal any of the old wiring in the limbic system. But that doesn't address the brainstem. It's not actually helping to rewire the brainstem. And what the researchers are finding out is that actually mindfulness meditation goes directly to the brainstem and helps to heal that, which is our regulator. It helps us to feel peaceful and at ease. And so this is, to have this aspect of the treatment program in such a robust way, really at the source of where a lot of the mindfulness meditation or Vipassana meditation has sprung from is a tremendous advantage.
Well, and I certainly can appreciate the fact that you tie in what would be the standard types of 3-circle exercises and experiences in with that cognitive behavioral therapy, in with that mindfulness training. I mean, that seems like that would activate all parts of the brain to really restructure how the neurocircuitry occurs, and that would change the addiction. I mean, sexual addiction is an intimacy disorder, but it's also a brain disorder, and you're really hitting it from a variety of techniques.
That's right, Carol. Yeah, I mean, I break it down into the three brain circuits that are predominantly involved. Of course, there are psychological manifestations then, particularly with sex addiction, that are quite specific to do with earlier childhood issues often, etc. But they'll come into the therapy in a natural way as we as humans talk to each other. But what we've got to do on a more biological level, if you like, is three things, really. Sort out impaired reasoning in the forebrain, which is a biological feature of the illness, makes addicts do silly things. We can only do that by constantly and vigorously challenging each other and reminding each other that you're an addict, which is why we have 12-step fellowship. We know now, neurologically, why 12-step fellowship works. Then, provide rewarding feelings. You've got two choices there, your active addiction or recovery work. There is no other choice for providing rewarding feelings for an addict. So, of course, we need to do the recovery work and provide slow, long-acting releases of dopamine and pleasure chemistry, not nasty, spiky, drug or sex-related dopamine reinforcement. And then memory and learning. We need to learn new things and remember new things. And if we do that, we're starting to heal the addicted brain long-term. And I have a passion for delivering this, which, I mean, the reason why I relocated to Thailand is, A, working in public sector in the UK, it was very difficult to move some of these ideas forward because it was a very slow machine. So I needed to have the space to pioneer this kind of thing. And secondly, we can give this treatment to people from all of the Western countries at a very, very affordable rate, approximately probably 3 times less expensive than would be in the West, because of course we're in Thailand and our overheads are lower. So that is really probably the thing that would be attractive to Western clients is, they don't need to pay, the very high cost necessarily, but they would need to travel. So to add to your question previously, that would be the other thing that sets us apart. There's no compromising in quality, but there is a difference in price.
Well, and so it would probably be inappropriate for me to ask, what is the average stay there and how much is the cost?
Yeah, so about 50% of our clients will stay for 28 days. We insist that people do commit to 28 days. 14 days isn't going to do anybody much good, so we dissuade that. A 28-day program, we can build a 3-circle plan, regardless of whether you're a sex addict or a substance-dependent client. That would be $12,900 US, which, as your listeners will know, is extremely competitive. But about 50% of our clients then extend. So we have virtually more or less 100% completion rate. There are very few people that leave here. We offer an industry unique refund policy. So after a very short time period at the beginning, you decide you want to leave, it's not for you, we will refund you. And the reason why we do that is because we know that you probably won't want to. So we're quite confident in offering that. Now that is very difficult for you to find that anywhere else. But 50% of our clients will extend to 2 or 3 months, having not initially decided to do so. Initially, there will be full of excuses as to why 28 days or less is required because they're such a busy guy, etc. And then find they reprioritize things. So I think it's something about our environment. We're essentially in a manicured jungle here. It's an extremely beautiful environment. And there's something about mature trees and big rivers and mountains that help you heal, as well as the quality of the treatment. So, yeah, I think for Westerners, it would be well worth the trip. It is a long way, but you get something that would probably be very difficult to get anywhere else.
Well, and, I was saying earlier that I'm a coach and that, I do a lot of exercises that are self-actualizing. And one of the things we know is environment is crucial to change. And so it sounds like the environment that people are in is exquisite, and it's spiritual, and it's very natural, and that's a wonderful thing. And then, if I understand you correctly, you said that for around $13,000, somebody can get treatment, and if for some reason they didn't feel like it was for them, you would refund the money. And that totally makes you all unique. I don't know of any treatment center in the world that offers that. Now, granted, I don't know every treatment center, but I've certainly interviewed at least 25 of them. So kudos to you guys for making that happen. That is what people deserve. I'm just very appreciative that you would offer that kind of money-back guarantee.
That's right, Carol. And I get, being an ordinary guy, if it wasn't doable for us to do that, we wouldn't do it. The reason we do it is because we can afford to, because very few people will leave treatment. So that's the unique thing, I think, is the completion rate, really, which has allowed us to be able to do that for the few individuals who unfortunately doesn't quite fit for them personally and have to find something else. And we want them to find something else, and we will signpost them to other services. You're absolutely right. Environment is key. And environment also consists of people, let's not forget. And the local ties, we have probably 30, 35 now, I think, clinical staff who are Westerners, the psychologists, counsellors, and resident tech support workers. In addition to that, we've got 100 ancillary staff who obviously are tied. A 10-man nursing team is here 24/7. But the Thai staff, the ancillary staff, like, for example, the kitchen staff and reception and gardeners, we're in a strange position where our ancillary staff are very therapeutic to be around. So these are local Thai people who are very, very happy, cheerful people who seem to have the right priorities in life, ordinary working people. And once a month, just to give you a vivid picture of the cabin, once a month we have a dinner on the last Friday of the month in the evening, and all of the Thai staff will perform traditional Thai dances, etc. It really is quite a spectacle to see. And these are the types of experiences that create intimacy and start to wake people back up into their core self, their integral self, and remember who they were and who they want to be. And Thai people, of course, there are all sorts of different Thai people, but in general, the working Thai people of this local suburb of Chiang Mai are wonderfully therapeutic people to be around. Thais are famous for their hospitality. It's not all about beaches and go-go bars, Thailand. Northern Thailand, a very cultured place. It's mountainous. It's synonymous with spas and health treatment. And I think the more open-minded people in the West understand that now. They understand that Northern Thailand is a special place and a wonderful place to visit.
Absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough for educating us, talking about the cabin one more time. If people would like to look at your programming, they should go to the Internet and look up. Would you give the address again?
Sure, Carol. It's www.thecabinchiangmai.com.
Okay. And I so appreciate you putting this information together. Guys, I want to come back to you a year from now and interview you again. So thank you so much for being a part of the show tonight.
Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Carol.
You're welcome. Have a great night. Okay. Well, as you can see, these guys have some very interesting, successful programming. We are so pleased that they were able to talk to us about the cabin. And that's what this show is all about. It's about offering you choices and options. And, I can't speak highly enough of how important it is. So as I say at the end of every show, there will only be one of you at all times. Fearlessly have the courage to be yourself, and we will see you next week for some more sex help with Carol the Coach. Have a great night.